The Meckllinburgg is a legendary tier German battleship that was added to World of Warships Legends for the August 2026 update, and I suspect it's probably the ship that most of the community is the most interested in during this update. So we'll talk about it today. I'll run down the specs, I'll tell you what I think of the ship, and we'll also talk about how you obtain it. But before we get into any of those details, I'll show you my commander build. I was exclusively testing the Mecklenburg over about 20 matches with Azerlane Prinz Heinrich at the helm, mostly because she buffs the accuracy of the main battery guns, and the Mecklenburg is one of the rare German battleships that already has very accurate main battery guns base. So why not buff them? So, of course, the build is her. We have Kondo and Azerlane Sovetski Rossiya as her two inspirations to really spec into the concealment. Of course, you can do whatever you want. I consider concealment to be a survivability buff, and I think it's particularly useful if you're ever going to take a battleship into brawling range, because you can get closer to the targets without being focused down on the way in. I don't think we're going to do any real brawling, or actually, maybe we are at the tail end of the second match that I show you. I've got two of them for you. They just are not worth showing in their entirety because there's a lot of downtime. Anyway, before I suppose we get into the specs, or, let's talk about those now before we get into how to obtain the ship, because here you'll see some really good things out of these main battery guns. That salvo there against the Ohio with 2 citadels and 30,000 damage with the AP. Mecklenburg is fully capable of dealing damage like that, but it's not always going to look like that. These are small guns. They do reload quickly, though. We're about to have shots on either the Alaska or the enemy Mecklenburg, not quite sure who to shoot at. So we take the Mecklenburg, and then you see there we switch to the HE. I found that you do want to do a lot of shell switching in this, in spite of that result against the Mecklenburg being good. This is an FDG hull, by the way, which is not the best German hull that was ever designed for World of Warships Legends. In fact, I would say this is the worst German hull out of all the original German battleship hull designs. By that I mean the original German battleship line, not the battle cruiser one. There we get a fire on the Mecklenburg, but I suppose we'll start with the survivability here. You can kind of see that it's not always that ideal. In the case of that enemy Mecklenburg, your games can look a lot like that, where you get chunked down by other battleships or perhaps melted by a bunch of HE spam. I'm not sure how long this Mecklenburg is still going to be floating. You can see he's at just a little over half health right now, and we're only a couple minutes into the battle. And then us, for our part, we're drawing a lot of HE spam from whatever that cruiser is over there, from the enemy Mecklenburg. Probably some other people are shooting at us. You don't keep the HP all that often, but you do start with 88,000 or 85,800 HP. You only have 20% torpedo damage reduction, though, so you do want to watch out for those, and you've got no sonar to detect them, which is a rarity on German battleships. Instead, you've got the sea observation plane, or you could switch that out for the fighter or DFAA, but there is no option for sonar on this thing. And like I said, the FDG hull, the reason I say it is the worst of all the German battleship designs, it's because it's got the worst turtleback. If you look at the armor viewer and compare the FDG to the Grosse Kurfürst, you'll notice that the Grosse Kurfürst's angles on the turtleback slopes go deeper into the water than the FDG ones. And so if you take an FDG hull into a turn, you are lifting that angled turtleback slope out of the water and exposing the Citadel to damage. I've been able to Citadel FDGs like that before. I'm sure the same thing could happen to the Mecklenburg in a turn. And of course, on top of that, it's got a ton of superstructure that's susceptible to all kinds of damage. And it's very easy to lose HP quickly in this thing if you push in too aggressively. If you keep it, at range, if you pick the right time to push in, then of course it can be pretty survivable and you can brawl with it. but I think it's probably more of a mid to long range battleship most of the time because it's got 16 305 millimeter guns. Pretty small guns for a battleship, but you've seen the kind of damage the AP can do even against other battleships at longer range. Speaking of range, we have 18.7 kilometers of range with this Azerlane Prinz Heinrich build, although the base range is 17.3. We've also got a 23.4-second reload time, pretty quick, of course. That is with, I believe, the reload mod, and the base reload is 26 seconds, which is still really fast. As for the turret traverse time, it's ridiculously fast, actually. We've got it down to 21.7, which seems absurd. The base time is 22.5. That almost makes me wonder, are we running the reload mod? Yeah, we are running the main battery reload mod that gives a 12% nerf to the main battery turret traverse time, but still, 21.7 seconds. So if you are ever in a brawl, you're going to be able to get your turrets on target really quickly. As for the Sigma, it's buffed somewhat by Azerlane Prinz Heinrich. The base value is 2.05, but we have it up to 2.15, which is part of the reason why these guns are so accurate. The dispersion numbers, likewise, are also pretty good. I don't know if this is battle cruiser dispersion or not, but it kind of feels like that. And here, I think, is another example of the accuracy of these main battery guns. You did see what they could do against the Ohio, but against a cruiser, well, there's 4 Citadel's devastating strike against the Castilla. That's 6 Citadels so far in this battle with the small 305 millimeter guns of the Meckllinburgg. These things, by far, are the best part about the ship. I don't think the armor scheme is great. I don't think the survivability is all that great. And if you've noticed this entire time as we've been trying to get these guns on target, the firing angles are also really, really bad. You have to give a lot of broadside to get all 4 of the turrets on target when you're firing forward or when you're firing backwards. And that is not ideal, especially with what I said earlier about the FDG hull being more susceptible to citadels in a turn. Obviously, you would need to turn in order to get all of the guns on target. Speaking of guns, here we go again with another good salvo against a cruiser. You just don't want to be a cruiser giving broadside to the Meckllinburgg. That poor Carnot didn't, I suppose, realize he was doing that. He knows now, though. 8 citadels, and this battle is drawing to a close here. I think we may get another salvo or 2 on target before it ends, but we should probably talk about the damage that these guns actually do. As for the AP, the base shell damage is 9,400. With Azerlane Prinz Heinrich using some skill, we've got it buffed to 9,654. Pretty low, but again, there's 16 guns. They're very accurate. You've seen the damage that they can do in spite of their small size for the tier. The penetration's also good. At point blank range, it's 631.6. At max range, 311.5. And well, 311.5 is probably not enough to get through the Citadel armor of some battleships at those maximum range, but I really don't think the penetration here is that much of a problem. As for the HE, the maximum damage is actually really bad. It's only 3,600. And the fire chance is not that impressive at 27%, but again, with 16 guns, the volume of fire makes up for that, and you probably will have to shoot HE from time to time against angled targets where the AP just doesn't have any good effects. But again, there you see another good salvo on the enemy Meckllinburgg out in the distance. The thing also has secondaries, like most German battleships do. We've got the range at 6.3 km. I think that's because of the aiming systems mod. Base range is 6, so I suppose you could build into these secondaries and extend them to somewhere maybe a little north of 10 kilometers. I don't know if you'd get all the way to 11, but I wouldn't build into the secondaries. I think this is a main gun battleship by and large, And if you try to make it into a brawler, I suppose you could have success, but I think the ship is most effective when you're utilizing the main battery, just because it's so accurate and the damage it does can be so good. But you could spec it for secondaries, I suppose. It has torpedoes too. They're what you would expect from most German battleships. There are two torpedo launchers with four torps on either side of the ship. They've only got a range of 6 kilometers. They're not particularly fast at 64 knots, and they don't hit for a ton of damage. Only a maximum simulated damage of 12,739. So they're useful in a brawl, I suppose, but I wouldn't really make it a priority to go out there and land these torpedoes on target. I think you still want to maintain some healthy distance and get ships with the main battery guns. As for the AA defenses, it's got an aggregate AA defense rating of 98, which I suppose that's good. I don't know how good it really is against defending itself against CVs. I've seen a few. I've had them drop me. It does not feel great. In fact, I was playing against one of the new Franklin Delano Roosevelts a couple days ago, and that thing with its HE bombs hit me for 12,500 and started 2 fires. There's nothing my AA could do about that, so I wouldn't really expect to be protecting yourself. The maneuverability on the thing is, as you might expect, not the best, although we do have a top speed of 32.5 knots, which makes us a fairly fast battleship, especially for our size. Turning circle radius, though, is 930 meters. Not quite as bad as, like, the Grosse Kurfürst, I suppose, but you're not exactly agile. You could definitely say that. And the rudder shift. Somehow we have it worse than the base time of 15.9 seconds. We have it at 16.7, which, as far as battleships go, is certainly not the worst, but I wouldn't call it great either. And then the concealment, well, we're at 12.3 kilometers because of my build philosophy. You probably wouldn't be. The base concealment range, I believe, is 15.1, so if you're just going to use concealment mod, which I would absolutely recommend you do, if you think, oh, I'm going to use, what's it called, that other thing in the third module slot that people take instead of concealment, chromium-plated barrels, well, good luck. I don't think you really want to be spotted at 15.1 kilometers in a German battleship like this that is going to draw a lot of fire, has a gigantic superstructure, and can just take a lot of HE damage and chunk damage from any distance. I think you want to at least use the concealment mod, and you absolutely do not need chromium-plated barrels to get these guns looking accurate and dealing a lot of damage. All you really need is an accuracy battleship commander. And if you don't have Azerlane Prinz Heinrich, I probably would go with Franz von Hipper. Although, in this update, all of the Azerlane commanders are available for, I think, direct purchase, 5,000 doubloons each. So you could pick up Azerlane Prinz Heinrich, especially if you end up getting the Meckllinburgg for free, which is technically possible. So I suppose we should end this discussion on the ship by talking about how you actually obtain it. And I'm sure it's everyone's favorite method. The only way to obtain Meckllinburgg as of the August 2026 update, and I'm sure these will not be available after the update ends, is to get them out of the Grand Explorer's Chest. Now, if you go to the store, you can find the regular Explorer's Chests for 1,250 doubloons each. And throughout the update, there are various ways to get the regular Explorer's Chests for free. So it's possible you could get the Meckllinburgg for free, but it doesn't drop out of the Explorer's Chest. Instead, you need to rely on the Explorer's Chest's 10% chance to give you a Grand Explorer's Chest. And it's out of the Grand Explorer's Chest that the Meckllinburgg will drop. It has a 9.9% chance of dropping out of those chests. So it's not even a straight up loot box thing. You have to buy the loot box, get another loot box out of it, and then get the ship out of that. So even though it says 9.9% chance on the Grand Explorer's Chest to obtain Meckllinburgg, The chance is realistically lower than that because it's entirely possible you could buy a ton of regular Explorer's chests in hopes of getting one Grand Explorer's chest out of them and not get one at all. I could see people probably spending hundreds of dollars before they obtain this ship, or maybe spending as little as 10 bucks, potentially even getting it for free. If you look in the official World of Warships Legends Discord server, you'll find plenty of examples of people getting this ship for cheap or for free. But in conclusion on the Meckllinburgg, I think the ship is decent. I think it's okay, but I would rate it mid for legendary tier. There are battleships that are way better than this at the tier, and there are battleships that are worse than this. It's just decent. And I think it is the kind of ship that people are massively going to overrate for the time being, just because it's the new shiny thing in the seas. But after a couple of months, I think the general consensus on the Meckllinburgg is going to match what I've told you here at the end of this video. The ship is not the best ship at legendary tier. It's got big problems, namely the FDG hull is not good. I don't like it, but the main battery guns on this thing are frankly excellent, and that goes a long way toward carrying the ship to a good status. It's a fun ship to play. It's not my favorite though, and I don't think it is like one of the best ships at the tier. It's just not, but it is fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.